actually came here this morning to call out the racism that is inherent in the U.S. dietary guidelines.
And there was a real heaviness in the room. I think people really took note of that. I think there was some eyes popping like, whoa, he's going there. And it was like, yes, he absolutely is going there. So the USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, reviews dietary guidelines for Americans every 5 years. So this in 2019 is their review period where they will then listen and assess and create new dietary guidelines for Americans and release them in 2020. So we were there to speak to the committee. It was about a 10-member committee. They had an open forum. You had to register to speak. I think hundreds, if not thousands of people registered to speak, and they ended up selecting 72 speakers. And so we went to speak on behalf of moving over to a plant-based diet. I specifically focused on dairy and removing dairy as a food group for humans from the dietary guidelines for 2020.
For athletes and non-athletes alike, the destructiveness of dairy is multi-layered.
Well, we had incredible docs and nutritionists on the plant-based side speaking loud and proud.
My patients are confused. They're confused by the guidelines, and they're confused by the discussions here, and they're confused by bad science.
We cannot allow the billion-dollar meat industry to continue to subvert the science when so many million lives are at stake.
So I ask you to look at the science very carefully.
This committee now has control over our number one killer.
One of the most outdated recommendations by the dietary guidelines is its commercially oriented push for Americans to consume dairy.
What was really incredible about this opportunity was that it does fall in the wake of a major breakthrough from Canada, our neighbors of the North, in removing dairy as a food group for humans from their dietary guidelines.
Canada's decision to remove milk from a prominent position in the Canadian Food Guide is a testament to that nation's ability to support and respect science and its multicultural population. America should be no less aware and no less accountable to all of its people.
It was highly motivating to get to speak to the committee on behalf of food injustice. I mean, when Susan Levin and I started discussing what I would talk about, we kind of were going in the direction more of enhanced performance and health because I'm an athlete, so that would be the obvious.
Cow's milk proteins, particularly casein, which makes up 80% of cow's milk, have been shown to increase mucus production in the gut and in the respiratory tract. Impaired breathing, asthma, and chronic runny nose can all be exacerbated by drinking cow's milk. By regularly consuming dairy products as a means of a recovery fuel, an athlete's acute inflammation and oxidative stress can become chronic, leading to prolonged recovery, muscle fatigue, cell damage, and even elevate one's risks of chronic diseases.
But I absolutely could not go there and just talk about those two subjects. First of all, I knew the doctors would have the health aspect covered quite well, as they did. And I just felt really compelled and that it was a duty that I go there and speak on behalf of food injustice.
For the USDA to continue to put its stamp of approval on a product that is unnecessary and unhealthy and rooted in a highly oppressive system is unconscionable.
Animal products like dairy, they're wrought, completely wrought with grave injustices. And the most important to know is that 65% of Americans can't tolerate cow's milk. They're intolerant, and we know it is lactose intolerance. But truly, the truth is that people that cannot digest cow's milk in adulthood are normal, and those of us who can are abnormal. So we're intolerant of something. The white people who've been milking cows for God knows how long. We have an enzyme in our gut called lactase that digests our mother's breast milk. And around the age of 4, as Mother Nature would have it, that enzyme turns off because we no longer need breast milk.
There is no scientific or nutritional reason for people to be consuming dairy products. We have no more reason to suck on the teats of a cow than we have to suck on the breast of a postpartum weasel.
So in white people, or the people who have been milking cows, which are inherently mostly Northern European white people, we actually have a genetic mutation that keeps that lactase enzyme turned on through adulthood. So we are the abnormal ones. And a lot of the America's population, as well as the world's population, who cannot tolerate cow's milk in a much higher percentages, 86% of African descent, and 95 to 98% of people of Asian heritage can't tolerate lactose or the casein in cow's milk at all. And so we presented this idea of food injustice to the committee to say, hey, listen, a really large majority of your people can't tolerate this, and it's actually making them very sick.
The vast majority of people of color in this country are intolerant of the lactose that's in milk. Yet, because they think they have to eat this stuff, they go out, eat it, get sick, and think that they have some sort of intestinal problem.
Because the symptoms of lactose intolerance are anywhere from stuffy nose in the morning to asthma to waking up with mucus in your lungs to constipation, diarrhea, stomach bloating, cramping. I mean, they're really pretty serious feelings that people have when they can't tolerate cow's milk or any derivative of it, right? So cheese, cottage cheese, yogurt, butter, whatever it might be. So I'm hoping that the USDA will listen to this point and say, hey, wait a minute, this is something we should consider taking off. Because if almost 65% of our population can't digest this and it's not a good food for them because it's making them sick, why on earth would it be on their plate?
When I encourage them to stop eating dairy, their problems cleared up. And so it's really outrageous to encourage people to eat foods we know will make them sick, particularly when the number one reason advanced for dairy foods is its calcium content, but African American women are genetically protected against getting osteoporosis, so we're making them sick for no good reason.
So in regards to Dr. Milton Mills' comments, and one of the very first things he said when he came up to the microphone in pointing out that sitting up before us, the committee, there was no ethnic diversity whatsoever.
I actually came here this morning to call out the racism that is inherent in the U.S. Dietary Guidelines, but then as I got to look at this committee, I suddenly understood why it's such an intractable problem. This committee bears no relationship to the general makeup of the American populace, and whoever put it together is clearly still practicing the optics of tokenism.
So it really was a bunch of white people, couple women, but mostly white men. And so I think he made a really strong point before he even went into the injustices about dairy. And there was a real heaviness in the room. I think people really took note of that. I think there was some eyes popping like, whoa, he's going there. And it was like, yes, he absolutely is going there.
It is outrageous to have a committee that does not reflect the American population. And as non-minority members of this committee, I should think you would be embarrassed looking around this table.
Because it's a problem. It's a problem that we have these injustices in our dietary guidelines. And if you look at who's creating these guidelines, it's not ethnically diverse whatsoever.
Those who cannot effectively digest the lactose in cow's milk, they experience really painful symptoms like abdominal pain, bloating, gas, nausea, diarrhea, constipation. Why on earth does the USDA have a food category on the dietary guidelines for Americans that makes over half of us sick, uncomfortable, and unable to breathe?
For human health, for human performance, for planetary responsibility, and for food injustice. We cannot push this so-called food group on human beings that over half of us cannot digest.
So I want to encourage you, get the racism out, get the dairy out. Please do your job. Thank you.
We are so excited for everything that we're doing and planning in the future. Switch for Good, you can check us out at switchforgood.org. We have a podcast if you're interested in listening weekly to thrilling, amazing, incredible athletes, as well as doctors and nutritionists and dietitians and physiologists. We've got some just kick-ass guests on the podcast. And then as you guys know at Plant-Based News, we do a lot of education and inspiration, video style, and graphic and meme work too.